You're listening to another Ambitious Entrepreneur Network.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
You're listening to the award-winning podcast, The Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, featuring business leaders to help you navigate a constantly changing marketplace. Want to become known as a trusted authority while building a thriving business you love? The Ambitious Entrepreneur Show will show you how. Here's your host, Anne-Marie Cross.
Welcome to another episode of the Ambitious Entrepreneur Show. Today's topic is going to talk all about how to stop being the biggest bottleneck in your business. And CEOs, we often can be. And today's guest says your procedures do not need to be an encyclopedia with all the details. And joining me on today's show is Owen McGab Enaohwo. And Owen is the CEO. He's also the co-founder of SweetProcess. Now, SweetProcess is an easy-to-use software that enables company executives as well as their employees to collaborate together to quickly document and even improve their standard operating procedures, their processes, as well as their policies. Now, Owen, he was previously the CEO of Hire Your Virtual Assistant, H.Y.V.A, a virtual assistant service for small business owners. And his specialties include business development, negotiation, operation management, and all of those very important tasks. Now, on today's show, Owen's going to share how to stop doing it yourself so that you don't become and remain the bottleneck. He's going to talk about delegating tasks to employees. And he's going to talk about as well how to get employees excited to help you document your company's SOPs, and how to install and cultivate a culture of continuous improvement in the minds of your employees. So very important when it comes to creating a streamlined business. And as we know, I'm sure you're going to share with us, Owen, when processes, policies, and so forth are streamlined, we can focus on continuing the momentum building and growing of our business. So welcome to the show.
Anne-Marie, thanks for having me here. I'm glad to be here.
Now, as we mentioned, you were formerly the CEO of Hire Your Virtual Assistant. I always love giving my guests an opportunity to share the path that led them down to where they are today. Can you give us a snapshot of what led you down the path to the Hire Your Virtual Assistant? What was that journey?
Okay, so before we started, SweetProcess, this was the fourth quarter of 2013. I used to run an agency where I would provide, U.S. entrepreneurs with back office staff like virtual assistant and so on and so forth from the Philippines. And this was a time when they had read the books like the 4-Hour Work Week or The World is Flat. And so they realized that, this idea of being able to outsource your work at a very affordable price to like someone in an English speaking country, different time zone and all that, to actually do the work was actually something that they could do. Because before then, a lot of people would always think of this was only limited to like the larger big telecoms and so on and so forth, that they would just go and hire hundreds of people at a time to handle the customer service. So these books opened them to the idea that, hey, even the small business owners could do it. But the problem that we ran into was that a lot of times when these people will come after reading the book, because the books did a good job selling the idea, but they also, I think some of them, for our work specifically, sold people on this false idea that, you could just find somebody in a different country, different time zone, maybe English is not even their first language, and that they'll be able to just do your work magically. So, so we had to do some kind of onboarding and training of every new customer that, hey, I know you just read this book and they sold you on this idea, but the reality is that in order for us to do your work and do it the way you want it to be done, there needs to be some form of training on the work, right? So what we would do back then is, this was before the days of Zoom and StreamYard and all this fancy tools. We're just in Skype. Can you imagine Skype? We'll get on Skype and someone on my team will have a conversation with the client to talk about a specific single task that, a recurring task that they wanted to hand over to my team. And after that session of training on the task, they get to show their screen, they get to talk in details about the task. Someone else on my team will take that recording and turn that into a step-by-step procedure or whatever on how the work is done. But yes, the issue was that act of trying to create the documentation on the task was actually a pain, because it was either we're struggling with these enterprise level tools that were built for like actual process consulting and people that are really technical in the whole process consulting side of things, or we're trying to hack together a bunch of tools that are meant for just regular document publishing, but not meant for this whole thing of documenting procedures. So in the back of my mind, I was like, there has to be a solution for this issue. So I just, put it in the back of my mind that maybe eventually I'll find a solution. And so I went, just like how I'm on the podcast now, I went on a podcast called Mixergy. I went on there to teach the listeners how they could document procedures and streamline their operations, right? Just kind of like what I'll be doing on this call. And luckily, my co-founder Jervis, all the way from Australia, listened to the entire interview and reached out to me and said, hey, he had this idea he's working on and he wanted to get my feedback. So I said, okay, let's go ahead and have a conversation. Lo and behold, after we had a conversation, he was essentially trying to build a software that would make it easy for people to document procedures. And I was in that situation where I was having a hard time finding the right tools or putting together things for the service of what I was doing. I was like, dude, instead of just giving you suggestions on how to improve this or how to do this software they're trying to build, would you consider us working together? And he was excited. He said, okay, yeah. So we went ahead to start working together. But I said, instead of us going to to build the software, like all developers, they once they have this mind on doing something, they have the skills, right? They just go ahead and want to jump ahead and do it. And I was like, dude, let's not do that. Instead, what I want us to do is spend some time having conversation with potential customers, because the first thing was that my perspective on this issue was limited to the people who I was working with as my clients. So, and then another reason why I wanted to do these interviews was that I wanted to get a perspective of people from different industries, as well as try to see if there might be something that I might be missing. But more importantly, I didn't want to just jump and build a software that was hard to use and feature bloated like the same ones I was having issues with. So we wanted to really understand the problem. So what we did, after we decided we're going to work together and started a company, we had like almost like 30 plus interviews with potential customers from different industries, trying to understand the issue that they were facing from the standpoint of trying to create that single place where employees can go at any given time to find out how it is to do their work, and what was the blockers, what was the issues that was preventing them from actually doing it, and even when they were doing it, what was preventing them from actually improving these documents, and so on and so forth. So based on these conversations, we're able to pinpoint a bunch of different root issues, and then we use those root issues that we discovered from the interviews to now say, okay, now let's go back and build a software that addresses each of the issues that we discovered during the interviews, right? And one thing we did was to make sure that we remove all the additional features that were overkill, whatever, just because we want to keep this stuff simple and easy to use. So moving forward, SweetProcess now has over 2,000 companies as customers. The typical company has anywhere from 30 plus employees all the way to even like 100. I mean, we have some that even have 1,000 employees and more. We have banks using SweetProcess. We have government agencies using SweetProcess. We have churches using SweetProcess for their volunteers. I mean, we have lawyers, law firms, orthodontists. I mean, it runs the gamut, because the reality is that this problem of having employees have that single place where they can go find information on how to do their work, regardless of the industry, it is something that everybody who's running a business experiences and feels. And you cannot really scale the company and get to that level of growth that you want to without having this in place. Because the reality is, a lot of the work you're going to do, if not more than 80%, have to be done by people. Right? Yes. It's not everybody can automate everything in their company and say machines do everything. No, for most people, including listeners who are listening, most of the work that needs to be done will need to be done by people. And so how do you make sure that the work gets done at the scale that you, at the level that you want it to be at, is through having these documents in place and having it being such that people can easily access and continuously improve them.
Yeah. I mean, Owen, thank you for sharing that snapshot. There were so many golden nuggets in that. But one of the things that I want to highlight, and then we'll move on into the points that you want to share. But this is something that you said, and it's such a great reminder for all of us in business. you didn't jump in straight away and design and create this program, which we now as SweetProcess. You spoke to over, as you said, 80 people to really find out what is it that they're struggling with. And just hearing you share that story, you know, there may be entrepreneurs that have got a business idea and they have not yet done enough research to know that when they launch it, they're going to hit all of the points, all of the pain points, and offer all of the solutions and outcomes that their ideal client is looking for. So, well done on that. I mean, that's just incredible. But I have to smile. I was smiling as you were sharing your story because when I first started one of my very first businesses, it was in the secretarial area. Then it moved on into working in the career industry. And I had my very first, we didn't even call them VAs back then. They were called, I don't know what we called them, something about secretaries,
PAs?
because there was no term such as
Oh
then.
yeah.
This person was based in Australia, actually probably 5 minutes up the road from me. And, you know, it was doing the emails first. But one of the things that I did, and I didn't realize that, you know, we really needed it, I documented it. These are the steps, these are the scripts, because she was going to respond. But now, of course, fast forward, so many more people are using VAs. But that, what you just said, is one of the greatest bottlenecks in someone hiring, onboarding, and then training and supporting someone who could become a key player in the team because of the lack of systems and processes. People want to do a great job, but if they don't know what that great job is, what the milestones are, how to do the job, then it's very difficult for them to be productive. And you can end up as the entrepreneur with a whole lot of other issues to have to deal with, not taking the time to get something set up first. So let's talk about, how do we start? Where do we start? If we're talking to an entrepreneur, and many people who are listening to this particular podcast may be at a stage where, to expand their business, they have to step away and they have to start looking at some of these things to be able to document so that they can onboard maybe not just, you know, another VA, but some people that really take over some of the solid tasks that are required in the business. What's the first step, Owen?
So the very first thing I would suggest the listener do is look through the work that they're doing on a daily basis, and like, just because here's the thing is, you're not trying to document everything. You're going to only document the recurring task that you do. So if it's a task that you do one time and don't do it again, you don't have to worry about that. That's more like a project. Forget that. It's just the recurring task that you have to do on quite a repetitive basis. Now, once you have a list of those tasks that you guys do on a repetitive basis, people might be excited and say, hey, they want to just jump in and start documenting. I say, no, let's look at everything that you're doing on a repetitive basis and determine which things are required to be done. Because there's this whole thing of tribal knowledge where this is how we've always done things here. And, you know, you get excited, you want to start documenting, and then you want to take the things, everything, and start documenting. So I want you to take some time to figure out, okay, what needs to be eliminated? Because if you need to eliminate it altogether, so you have, you know, a less list of things to document. The next, you'll be left with the things that are required to document, and they're recurring. And now I want you to break that down into two different sets of tasks. The first one will be the income generating tasks, the sales, the marketing, the exciting tasks that people always talk about as entrepreneurs, right? The sexy tasks, like how we think of them. And then on the other hand are the tasks that are, you know, production tasks, where these are the things that you have to do in order to deliver to your clients or your customers what you actually have promised. So it's more on the back, you know, office side of things and more production. And they're not the most fancy stuff, to be honest, right? But yet, that's why I want you to focus on, is on the production side of things. Let go of the, you know, the sales and marketing for now, because if you start documenting the sales and marketing things, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be excited that, oh, you have documented how you get people in, you've documented how you have your marketing in place. You want to now start bringing more employees to take over from the work, right? And now they start implementing and getting results. Guess what? You get more customers who are going to be pissed and unhappy because you have a lot of bottlenecks on the production side of things that you've not fixed, right? So let's focus on the production side of things. Now, once we've decided we're going to focus on the production side of things, I want you to find that single task that is the biggest bottleneck on the production side of things, where every time it's about to happen or occur is a task that you're like, oh man, I don't know why I'm doing this. Or it's a task that every time your employees are always asking you the same questions over and over again on the task. And so if that's the case, you identify the biggest bottleneck. And let's start with that very one. The reason why is if you can actually document that and start getting some results from the actual process of documenting, you can move to the next biggest bottleneck. So let's say we've identified that biggest bottleneck on the production side of things. How do you now document a task? I say when you're about to actually do the work, because when you're about to do the work, this is when your mind is most able to like think of all the things you need to do, and you already have gathered all the information you need to use to create the procedure. And so here's the thing: don't worry about documenting an encyclopedia in the very first instance. You need to just document what I call a minimum viable procedure. It's just the title of the task, where if someone reads the title, says how to do whatever, and your employees see that, they know exactly, but based on the title, what they can accomplish when they finish the procedure. And then as you are going through each step of the task, you go ahead and enter the title of each step. But yes, guess what? You don't put any details just yet. So it just be a rough outline. So in this example, we're working on a 10-step task. By the time you're done, actually working on the task, you will also have a procedure, a minimum viable procedure that just has title of the 10 steps, the title of the procedure and title of the 10 steps, and nothing else. How do you get that procedure with more details filled in? This is where you now get your employees or your managers who you've maybe verbally taught on the task how to do the work before. Say, hey, the next time you yourself about to work on this task, make sure you have this document right there in front of you, so that your job is just to go ahead and put in some details. It can just be a small blurb of text, or a small screenshot, or a small video. If you're going to use video, I suggest not even more than 2 minutes per video, so because you don't want to put like a whole movie and think people are going to watch a movie. So the shorter the video, the better. So that way, as they're working on the task, they are looking at something that's kind of like a guide, and it's not a blank screen, and then they can actually put in some information on your behalf. And when they do that, your job is to make sure that you look through that document and actually approve the document. So what happens is, over time, as you are working on the task, as they are working on the task, you guys keep going back to that document and keep improving the document, and it's going from version 1 to version 2 and keep improving. Here's the thing: before you even start this whole thing, you need to install in the minds of your employees that this is going to be a thing of continuous improvement. That, hey, I'm giving you all the permission that we're going to start from version 0 with everything that we're working on, and we're going to keep improving these documents as we go. So it doesn't have to be perfect. And once everybody agrees to this is the mindset that you use to do this. So now let's say you've done this dance, if you've been able to document the very first procedure for the very first biggest bottleneck, then you look for the next big bottleneck of tasks and do the same thing over again. And what happens is, you keep doing that, and you keep having these documents documented. And before you know, eventually you would have had like maybe the bulk of the task on the production side of things documented. And you can start facing the sales and the marketing, the sexy type of tasks that entrepreneurs will like. And you start doing that same dance and documenting them and improving the documents as you go. And what you will eventually get to a stage where you've documented a lot of the sales and marketing tasks. You can then start trying to get new employees to even take over some of these tasks from your hand and implement the instruction. But that on the back end, production won't be an issue, because you've documented how to actually execute the things you've promised, right? So that's the way to do it. Now, the person listening to this will be like, oh, I like this framework you've given me, but also, how do I get my employees to actually really be bought into this thing? So the first thing I'll tell you is, maybe the first thing you want to also do is also, hey, we got to be truthful of the fact that employees are brought in here to do work, and so for the most part, they're busy with a lot of work that they're doing. And now you're telling them that you want them to actually help you document stuff. Why don't you just incentivize them and literally say, I'll pay you for the extra time that you are working to improve this document, so that when you're done doing your work, you can, or even while you're doing your work, I'll pay you for, so that it's not like I'm just doing the whole act of helping you to document stuff. I'm doing it also knowing I'm getting paid. So incentivize them by paying them, because at the end of the day, it's for your benefit, the owner of the company or the manager or whatever. And then not only that, another way to kind of put that culture in their mind is that every time an employee comes to ask you a question, say, how do I do this? Maybe the first thing you answer back to them is, have you checked SweetProcess? Assuming you're using SweetProcess. Have you checked SweetProcess? It's not meant to be dismissive or whatever. It's meant to kind of be empowering and say, hey, have you checked SweetProcess? And if they say, oh, no, I've not checked SweetProcess. Okay, they do that the second time again. Have you checked SweetProcess? Over time, and people then get to learn that, okay, before I go meet my boss or my manager for how to do this very task or whatever, I need to first of all make sure I have checked SweetProcess. So just by you doing that, you're kind of training them. And over a bunch of times of doing that, this now becomes a habit that, oh, before I go meet my boss, the first thing I got to do is check SweetProcess. And so what do? They check SweetProcess, they see the document in there, they get the answer, they don't bother you. And what happens is eventually, maybe there's a task that they go and look for and they don't see the answer, right? And so now that becomes an opportunity to say, hey, I've checked SweetProcess, I don't see the answer. And that becomes an opportunity for you, the manager, to go ahead and create that document for something that was not existing. So you see how it's gone from continuous improvement to now actually creating new documentation for something that is required that wasn't even documented in the first place. Another thing that also helps to put that culture in the employees of doing this is that as they are, using the, a tool like SweetProcess, seeing all the different documents that's been created, they get to see, suggestions that are being made by their fellow colleagues, and how those suggestions went from actual suggestions to actually improving the document. They get to see conversation happening in the document as in the pre-planning. So when you see that, you'll be like, well, everybody here is helping to improve the documents. Let me chime in, and I see something on the ground when I'm doing this work. Let me chime in and put that instruction to them. And so they get to do that because they want to be part of the whole thing. So I've just given you like a bunch of ways in which you can kind of foster that culture. But one thing you also have to let the employees know is that when it comes to culture, people keep saying that they want to be in a company that listens to them and allows them to have their voice be heard. But if you can't boil it down to the root of the whole thing, you are here to do work, right? So which place is a better place to work? A place where you are actually encouraged to influence how you do your work? I would say that's a very good place to work, because they're literally giving you, empowering you to help in the improvement and documenting of how the work you do. That's one of the best cultures. You have to sell it in that way so that people are on the same level with you. Now, I've showed you ways to, the framework to use. I've showed you how to sell it to your employees. But let's say for some reason you don't even have time to do it, or for some reason your employees don't have enough time to do it. There are also people called process consultants. Process consultants are people who you hire onto your company, and their entire job is to come in there, help you look through your processes, or the ones that you don't have, or whatever, and help you kind of go through this framework. But they're hired to do this stuff, obviously at a higher fee, and they will help you create these procedures, processes, so on and so forth. And then you and your employees can take over from there. Even as SweetProcess, we realize that is an issue, so we also offer that services as well, where if you need process consulting, we can actually help you with that. But I'm just giving you a bunch of different options that are available that you can do it with your employees, and also if you need to, you can also get a process consultant to help you as well. So I'm hoping that I've given listeners a way to do it.
I mean, I've just stepped back because this is your area of expertise, and I'm sure that everything you've shared has certainly given our listeners and viewers a great place to start. Now we have Dean Hires here, who's asked a really great question, and actually this was in back of my mind too. He said, and thanks for this, Dean, what about when the bottleneck is tied to experience and an instinct resulting from years of practicing, and that instinct becomes harder to document? I wonder, Owen, do you have any advice on perhaps what to do and approach this?
So the thing is, why is it hard to document? Because even though you have the experience from years of doing this, if it comes down to it, it's still a step by step, right? It's not some magic thing that you're just spinning some magic. It's all back to steps. So all you got to do is document the steps as you go. Start from there. Like I said, follow that idea of the minimum viable procedure. Don't worry about the details just yet, just the outline. And then from there, you work with your team to try to push in more details. Because yes, one thing that will happen is, and this is also something we realized during the interviews, is that a lot of times people say that, okay, the whole idea of creating this document is one thing, but a lot of times it becomes stale. And we realized that for us to avoid that situation of documents becoming stale, the whole software of the documenting side had to be married with the task management. Because the reality is, a lot of times the innovation, the insight of things that were missed when you initially documented the document comes when people are doing the work. So the software we had to build in case of SweetProcess had to have both the document management and collaboration side of things, with the task management so that when people are doing work, they come across these issues that were not addressed when the underlying document was already documented. They can pass that feedback back to you, the manager who built the procedure or process. And with a click of a button, if you like that feedback, you can go ahead and improve it. And now, while they're working on the ground, that document has been improved with the new information. Yeah.
hmm Actually, let me just add, Dean. So you mean discover and document the steps you don't realize are steps. They must be actual steps. Is that right? Is that
Yes.
it? Is that what you're referring to?
So when it comes to I don't want to complicate this with the whole process jargon, but it really comes down to steps or decisions, right? So a step is basically, this is the title of the step. This is what you need to do in the step. Or a decision is, okay, there's a specific question being asked, and based on the answer to that question, you go down a different path. It's like a fork in the road. So that's really what it boils down to when it comes to checklists. Is it a step or is it a decision? And in
Yeah.
SweetProcess, you can do all of that. So it allows you to document, both linearly and also document with
There may be
decisions as
some
well.
scenarios around there, and Dean, and for others who are considering this as well, there may be some different examples that perhaps instinctively you have approached a certain, decision to that tasking. Then give them some of those examples, and then if the team member has their own examples, they can continue to add that to the existing document. But it's interesting too, I think, Owen, when we're talking about putting together these wonderful systems, procedures, and policies, we then also goes hand in hand with the type of people we hire. And Dean, I would imagine if there is a certain level of expertise, and I know a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast, they are specialists in their field. So it has come through many years of experience and knowledge and certifications and such. And so I would imagine if there's a requirement of a role in that area, you're going to hire someone who has similar experience, or at least is positioned in that way, if that makes sense. But then they're also, one of the things I love about what you said, Owen, is going through the different stages and the steps. We also have to see, as entrepreneurs and CEOs, there may be some specific tasks in our business that when we look at, we're not yet in the place to be able to hire someone to do that, because it's very much aligned with our area of expertise, and it very much relates to income generation. Now, when we're still in that growth stage as the CEO, we're doing that till we can get someone in there that has the ability to step in, whatever that may be. So great questions there, Dean. Great questions there, Dean.
And even at that stage, I would still say still document it, because a lot of this task that you're working on, it might not be that you're doing it daily. So it might be like every once a month or every 6 months. Imagine how much time it takes to do a task like that, where you have to spend some brain cycles, like I call it, trying to remember how the task is done and gather all the information before you do the task. Now you've wasted time from actually executing. So even though this is something that maybe you feel like only you need to do it right now based on the stage of the company, having these documents in place is actually important, because it helps you get work done faster because you have the documentation. And I tell you, when you have documentation on how you do your work in place, because you're not spending time trying to figure out how it's done, what actually happens in your mind is, as you're doing the work, following the instructions, you now get to actually be more innovative, because you try to figure, okay, how can I do this better? And this is where these insightful thoughts of how to improve things start coming into your mind, and you start figuring out how to improve the document, because you're not spending time trying to remember how it's done. And as a matter of fact, it's even now important to actually have these documents in place, because back in the days, when people were working in the same office before COVID became a thing that made everybody now started working remotely, people could count on the fact that they could just walk down to the next cubicle or whatever and tap their friend on, or their colleague on the shoulder, and basically interrupt them so they can ask them a question, right? But right now, everybody's working from home. Most people are working from home, and as you know, with people who have kids and parents, you're probably doing some working from home and still dealing with kids and trying to do all the whole schooling thing at the same time. So it's critical now to make sure that information for how to do work is right there in front of employees, because those employees can count on how they used to do things, where they will interrupt people, because everybody's all behind the screen in their own home, trying to get work done with the limited time they have. So it's vital now to have these documentations in place.
Yeah, it is so true. And, talking about what Dean was saying, and he's got a couple of comments there. So, certainly circle back and connect the two of you. But he said, agree, it ties to developing intrinsic value in your organization instead of value that leaves the firm when you do. So agree. And back to that conversation, we were talking about, I was documenting something and then for a team member. And I said to them, do you know how to do this? And they said, yeah, absolutely. And then they went ahead and did it. And when I looked at it, I went, I would have approached it in a very different way. Does it work? Yeah, it works fantastic. We're going to do it that way. And, sometimes as entrepreneurs, because we've done things a certain way, we want to try and document it a certain way as well. Yet when we have the right team and say, well, how are you doing that? And then they documented it for you. So, together, that's kind of that collaboration there piece. Look, I know that, Owen, we have only scratched the surface, but one of the things when it comes to this, it reminds me of that saying, and I know it's a horrible analogy. I don't know if there's a different analogy, but that one that comes to mind, how do you eat an elephant one step at a time? When we look at maybe starting from scratch, it seems really overwhelming, but I love the way that you've really chunked it down. Start this, go back if someone's only just catching this interview to at least start documenting it. And one of the things that I have found going through the process, and I'm a bit of a systems person, I love geeking out on systems and so forth. Follow through is one of the things that I get stuck with because I'm off doing new, projects, which is why I have team to support me, is that there is something about slowly starting to document, and then the team starts referring to that, and then they go back and update it because together you've come up with a different way. It's empowering. And I think that's exactly what you said. When you instill a culture of that, everybody wins, doesn't it? And it's exciting because it's going to contribute to ongoing proficiency and getting the job done well. Yes?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, Owen, you said that you're going to share how people can perhaps trial out SweetProcess. Do you want to share a little bit more about that before we finish the show?
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do that. So by default, you get to try SweetProcess is a 14-day trial. And to go get that, I'm not saying you should get that. I want to give you an extended trial just for being on the show. To get access to that, you go to sweetprocess.com/AES. Just, the abbreviation for the name of the show. So sweet like candy, process.com/AES. And you will get a 28-day trial. So an extended trial just for being on the show. Thanks, Anne-Marie, for giving me the opportunity to share that with the audience.
Oh, look, and thank you, Owen. This is one of the things I think that no matter what stage you get in your business, your processes and all of those things that you should grow with you, shouldn't it? And, hearing that you've identified a bottleneck in the many systems and software out there, platforms. You don't want to get a system that becomes a bottleneck in itself to be able to document. You need something that's agile and obviously such as SweetProcess. So thank you so much for that generous offer to all of the listeners and the viewers. Really appreciate it. And thank you for coming on the show and sharing your expertise.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. And thanks, Dean, for your questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to have you along with us, Dean. Bye for now.
This podcast is brought to you by theinfluencealliance.com. Want to influence real change with your message by becoming known as a trusted authority in your industry while building a sustainable and scalable business you love? Find out how by accessing our free podcast series at www.theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series. That's theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series.